We're parents, teachers, and educators, and like you, we're passionate about restoring our culture for Christ. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education.
Hello again, I'm Marlon Detweiler, and this is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. Today we have with us Mike Sharrow, who is the CEO of a very interesting business as ministry, helping business as ministry business that you'll get a chance to hear more about. But let me welcome you first, Mike. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, absolutely, Marlon. Been looking forward to this.
Yeah, this will be a lot of fun. I've had a chance to know Mike for several years, having been part of the organization that he runs. But first, let's talk a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your upbringing and your family today and that sort of thing.
Sure. So I live in Texas right now, where I'm I'm a girl dad, married 21 years, but I've got two little girls that are in 7th and 5th grade this year. And we are doing a university model classical education program we've been doing for the last 7-8 years with them. And so my wife and I get to journey with that. And I grew up, though, as an Alaskan. So in Texan, that makes me a Yankee immigrant. So I'm my kids are Texan, but I'm something else.
The Northeast that would think of Alaska as an alignment for Yankeeism.
Me either, but I got called that. And I was like, it's more like Russian Canadian. Like it's kind of
I would grant that.
yeah. So I grew up in Alaska, military family, and as you know, a bunch of interesting God stories. So we got to know Jesus young, had health issues. And actually, I got involved in Christian education growing up because at a young age, I was crippled with an acute case of rheumatoid arthritis that, frankly, most schools just went, that's kind of complicated. We don't know how to deal with it. So they wanted to put me in a special ed program because I couldn't do
rheumatoid arthritis. Wow.
Yeah. My parents were like, well, that's kind of nonsense. Like it doesn't have learning challenges. He just don't make the kid run. He's got some knee problems. So really as a kind of a stopgap, like, well, we'll just homeschool him for a year and figure things out. And so did that. And then like, well, this actually had some upsides. And so we kind of journeyed into where it was like, well, okay, then how do we make this work? And so ended up doing kind of a variety of programs as elementary years, did a Becca homeschooling for a number of years, did a correspondence program. And so had a lot of my childhood shaped that way. But grew up getting to be shaped by an early love for Jesus, early love for his word, watching God lead me through and rescue me through family crisis. We had high times, low times, healthcare stuff, divorced my family, a bunch of different pieces. But in that, honestly, looking back, those were all the crucibles of which God really was forging faith and character and trust in him. So, grew up in a family of boys, now live in a family of girls, grew up in the mountains, now live in Texas. So I'm just confused.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I know you're not confused. It's just a variety of experiences.
That's right.
So what was your educational background? Did you go to college? Where did you go?
Yeah, so I met my wife going to a college in Chicago. So I got to the end of high school. I'd grown up not sure what I was going to do. I wanted to be in medicine, wanted to be a teacher, wanted to do art. Then I fell in love with the gospel and the church. And so I was like, man, the two things I wanted to never, ever, ever do, I said, was ever live in Texas, and I never wanted to work for the church. But at the end of high school, I was like, man, if I want to be about the kingdom, maybe I need to be a pastor. And so I committed at that track and went to a Christian college called Trinity on the north side of Chicago, and initially jumped in as a pastoral studies major. But end of my freshman year, I switched majors to business, actually the advice of my ministry professors, who said, frankly, I'd been well discipled and read a lot and done a lot of things as a youth. They said, you should get a different degree, like education, business, philosophy, and then maybe do seminary later. So I studied business, bib studies, and philosophy there. It's kind of a blending of things. And that's actually where I began wrestling with this whole idea of faith and work and vocation, identity, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I did college there, met my wife, Jackie. She was an Iowa farm girl. And we actually got married at the end of our sophomore year of college. So we were those weird people who were full-time school, working full-time, and married and commuting.
My mother was an Iowa farm girl from the Iowa City, Kelowna area.
Yeah, my wife was about 20 minutes north of well, more closer to the central part where Iowa State University is
Okay.
near Ames.
Very good. So before the work that you're doing now with an organization called C12, which we'll
Yep.
obviously get into in just a few minutes, where did your career path take you?
So the most formative time was I spent about 8 years working for a little drug company called Walgreens. Their headquarters was right by our college, and they had a bunch of subsidiaries. I got to be part of a startup they were doing that wasn't related to their stores; it was related to business consulting type services. And so, and had a phenomenal experience with them. In fact, they were actually testing ideas of faith and work and how Christians behave against non-Christians. And it was just a wonderful laboratory. So I got to do a ton of different roles and kind of do a corporate rotation program with them. And then I helped a gentleman who was a mentor of mine start a financial services business in the Chicagoland area, doing pension plans and annuities and exciting stuff like that. But it was with Walgreens that I moved to Texas to be near. My wife had family that moved here.
Okay.
So we came down about 17 years ago, and I was traveling all over the country as a consultant and doing work on helping governments and big corporations with healthcare strategy stuff. When the church that my wife was on staff at was looking to go on multi-site and doing things, and the church actually approached me about coming on staff and helping lead teams and teach and do leadership development stuff. So I actually spent just shy of 4 years in a pastoral role, and then had started a few nonprofits and got involved in foster care and missions and other pieces. And so I kind of did my tour duty there, started another healthcare company, was leading a healthcare company when I actually got involved in C12 as a member about 13 years ago. And then about 12 years ago is when I actually transitioned to become a local full-time C12 chair and coach and began that journey.
Okay. And how long have you been the head of C12 corporate?
A little over 7 years.
7
so
years.
early 2016 is when I started.
Okay. So tell us, I want to hear this in your words. I don't know that I've ever heard this. What is, in your words, what is C12?
What is C12? C12 is an organization helping business owners and CEOs truly integrate their life around the gospel, practically build businesses that glorify God, where the Bible is shaping and the gospel is shaping how and what and why you do everything, and unlocking really a greater purpose of what business means. And so it's solving the issues of how do you actually honor God in your career and vocation? How do you fulfill commissions and mandates to make an eternal impact in this world? And how do you have accountability and wise counsel to make sure that who you are and how you are is just as honoring to God as what you're doing for him?
Yeah, it was the idea of peer advisory and peer accountability.
Yep.
It was very appealing to me, and was the reason that I was a part of C12 for the years that I was, and that was really good to be with good guys, wrestling with things and completely different industries. Here we are in the education industry, dealing with guys in the manufacturing industry or the technology field, printing, all kinds of variations, and being able to see those common business principles that applied was so helpful, especially applying something from a manufacturing process to an educational process was really a good challenge. But the idea of bringing ministry into the workplace, where you have a company that's not distinctively Christian, was really fun to watch guys do. Our world was a little different than most because our business is about the gospel, right, and theirs is about sometimes a widget. Yep. Or an idea that yep. isn't distinctively Christian, but wanting that to be glorifying. Talk to us about how that gets developed.
Yeah, well, and part of what I love you engaging, because like I said, you had an implicitly and explicitly gospel-oriented product. Like your product was about the gospel.
Yeah.
But you and I both know there's plenty of wonderful organizations that have gospel missions, whether it's churches, schools, homeless centers, Bible, where sometimes the mission is clearly Christian, but maybe the process, the accounting and HR and operations is not always the best or excellent or as redemptively shaped. And so what I love is I don't really care how you pay taxes, whether your product is you're making pencils or you're making Christian education materials. I think God's honored and glorified by the way you do it, why you do it, and how it's impacting people in his world. And so we like to create environments where you've got, like you said, peer advisory. So you're going to get diverse peers around the table. There's going to be content and learning, and things are going to force you to look at parts of your business that you may not have thought about and make you assess and then get ideas. How do I begin to improve on that? And basically approach it like a gymnasium or a fitness program. Like it's not a 12-step program. I had a grandmother who's not a Christian. When I joined C12, she's like, grandson, I looked it up online. It sounds like AA for CEOs. Well, Grandma, we are all in need of recovery at some level, but there's more than 12 steps. But I get the correlation. It is a support program. It's got professional facilitation, but I've been in it 13 years. We have people who've been in 20 years. It's not a plug and play. It's a commitment to building and growing business and navigating ups and downs with an intentional framework that doesn't just say your business funds ministry. I think if you're running a traditional business, it's easy to feel like your job is to don't do bad things and fund people doing good things. And
a little oversimplified, maybe.
A little oversimplified. And so I think there's so much more to go. Hey, God cares about what you do, and the business is a ministry. The only question is if it's a good one, kind of like Charles Spurgeon said, every Christian is called to be a missionary or you're an imposter. There's not really a in between. So we now get to serve just shy of 4,000 people who are trying to be on that same journey across 4 continents. And if you think about it, I really view Sunday morning church as the locker room. That's the huddle of the team. You get coaching and equipping, but Monday through Friday, Monday through Saturday is the field of play. That's game day.
Yeah,
we get to impact the world, shape the world, and fulfill garden mandates, and creation mandates, and Great Commission mandates.
What I found, my involvement, as I said, was encouraged by somebody that said, Marlon, I think you're really due to have a board to work with. And I wasn't ready to jump in with a full board like that. And this was a good place for me to take the next step in that way. And it has been, my experience with it was so good, dealing with people who were quite successful, many of them more successful than me. All of them in very different industries, and yet having common core things about how we treat people, how we operate. And even from a techniques standpoint, it was really wonderful to be part of an organization that had guys that had been there before me, done things before me, and had ideas for management, like key performance indicators and bonus structures and that sort of thing to motivate what we really want. Those are things that I found immensely valuable, even more so than how do we operate Christianly, because that was stamped on the forehead of our organization. Now, that's not a given that we did, as you pointed out, it's not a given that our human resources are operating that way. We're thinking that way, but I don't think we were unaware of that. But the other things were so important, and for that to come out of a Christian organization has to do with, I think, a mindset of excellence. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I think so. When I moved to Texas, so actually maybe I'll back up and share. When a buddy of mine who ran a construction company was first invited me to a C12 meeting, I'd never heard of it. We were at an event somewhere, and he's like, "Hey, you should check out C12." And he said, "I said, what is it?" He's like, "That's a Christian business group." And I said, "Nah, thanks, I'm busy." And he said, No, like, you love God, you love business. This be your kind of group. Well, when I moved to Texas, it's my first time living in a Bible Belt community. There's actually a lot of, like, I didn't know until I moved here, everyone in Texas is Christian. They just don't believe in Jesus or read the Bible. It's kind of it's a different kind of Christian. Um, and then when it came to the business world, I'd often find people who were very overtly Christian in Texas with symbols and flags, but they often ran really bad businesses, and they'd almost revel in it, like being, well, but it's because I'm Christian or I'm being bold for God. And I'd be like, can you be a little less bold for God? Because your business doesn't represent him very well. And there's, or you find people who ran just moral businesses and they maybe tithed and it was kind of a good old boy club. And I really was just kind of allergic to all those things because I don't think grace should lower the standard. It should actually compel us to a higher standard of excellence. And sometimes Christians are guilty of what we call in C12 sloppy agape, where we think love and grace means love our expectations. And I remember calling a software company that was installing a CRM for us, and it was just a horrible installation. Product busted. So I called him, escalating this $80,000 software purchase. I need help here. And the VP went, "Now, Mike, you're a Christian, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I'm a Christian too, so I need you just to show us some grace." And I said, "Well, is that grace going to reflect on my invoice?" And he said, "Well, no." And I was like, "Well, I think you're misunderstanding grace. Grace should compel you to want to honor God in this piece." So yes, we get really serious. I think what surprises people, given our mission, our vision, and in our emphasis on eternal impact, is you get in C12 and we go, hey, if you're not running a profitable business, if you're not managing cash flow, if you're not putting in strong incentive plans, if you're not looking at lean processes in your programs, if you're not looking at these fundamentals of building a really great business, I don't think you're honoring God. Yeah. If you're gonna have if Jesus said, "Hey, I'm gonna come to your house for dinner tonight," I'm pretty sure you'd clean up the table, things would look nice, and you and your family would be like, "Let's make sure this is a great meal." And if he was to come and say, "Hey, I'd like to audit your business," man, it should be awkward if he comes and he's like, "This is how you run my business? This is you put a cross on this, you put a fish symbol on this." Yeah, so we do believe excellence does a couple of things. And when I was at Walgreens and I was wrestling as a Christian, I had a mentor recognize me as a young professional and say, "Hey, Mike, you're trying to figure out this whole Jesus and business stuff, aren't you? I can tell you're trying." And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, I think you're complicating it." And he says, "Okay, what should I do?" And he's like, "Let me give you advice. Two things. One, be super excellent at what you do. Be so above reproach in your work performance, your product, that no one can criticize you about anything other than your faith. They may still not like Jesus. They may not like that, but don't give them any other grounds of complaint." And he said, then second, man, be so genuinely in love with Jesus that you're not plugging him as a program or a tract, like he just oozes, like you can't help but talk about him as the reason for the hope you have. Anyway, if you do those two things, I'm not saying you won't get persecuted and people won't say, but you'll go far and you'll be pretty hard to ignore.
Yeah.
And that was true for my career personally. But I think in business, man, if you run a great business, Chick-fil-A is an easy one to look to, right? Even people don't like the Christian values of the Cathy family. It's hard to deny, man, they run a great business. And that great business gives them influence and impact and opportunity. And so I think excellence is a key part of honoring God in business.
Yeah. I love that. There's another category too. I wonder if we could go, it's a half step removed from C12, but it's something that I call a Christian negotiation. And this is my definition of it. I understand that it's not a comprehensive one. And it goes a little bit like this. I can give a specific instance, and I don't know that I'm the best example of this, but I have an example where I needed a painting done, and we have a teacher that teaches online for us who is also an administrator, who I asked if he would produce that painting for me. And he gave me a price on it, and I said, I will not exploit you for that price. I insist on paying you more than that. It is just as an example. I wish I had an example that wasn't mine, and I'm sure there are many out there. But the idea is always, nearly always, I'm a Christian, give me a better deal. Isn't it the gospel at work to say, I'm a Christian, I'd like to pay you more?
Yeah, it's a fun paradox. The tension of, we're called to be shrewd, and you want to be good business people, and but it's not meant to be cheap. So I think I remember having a wise mentor once told me, if you don't make money from your friends, it means you have to do a lot of business with your enemies. So if you don't learn to like charge a profit there and be okay, you're forcing yourself to have to do business a lot of other places. And I think at the end of the day, profit and pricing and compensation are reflections of value.
Right.
And I think we've entered an era where sometimes there's a social stigma as though like profit is bad or pricing is bad. And in the Old Testament, you had the instruction. There wasn't government aid, there wasn't entitlement programs, there was no stimulus programs for most of human history. So in an agricultural and trades environment, they were still supposed to do this idea of gleaning, right? Of even like having oxygen to help those who needed it.
Yeah.
And so that's a charity principle.
Yep.
But I think in business, one of the things I challenge CEOs with is in the Old Testament, kings, which is maybe the closest approximation for our role as CEOs, were held accountable not just for their personal piety and righteousness and good deeds, but what happened in their domain. And God would criticize kings who were like, well, they didn't worship idols, but people were taken advantage of, people suffered, there was injustice under their watch, and they didn't tear down high places and they didn't promote human flourishing. And I think in business, being concerned about wages, compensation, fair payment. We're actually about to launch right now a survey. We do this every year. We survey our vendors. We do our customer NPS, Net Promoter Score. Ask our customers, how are we doing? Do you like us?
Yep.
We ask our staff, how are we doing? Do you like working here? We actually survey our vendors and suppliers, and we ask them, do we pay you on time? Do we treat you with dignity? Do we fulfill our contracts? Do we communicate well? Would you recommend us as a customer to a peer in the industry? And how could we be a better customer? Now,
I love that.
We do it at times because we've actually not been a great customer. And so the first time we did it, it was an egg on our face to go shore up some bad relationships. But what it's actually led to is vendors calling and saying, wait a minute, this is reverse. Shouldn't I be asking? Why are you asking? And I go, because I actually think my testimony in the marketplace is I should be a great customer. And I want you to be profitable. I want you to make money in our account. Yeah. I want you to be thrilled to answer our emails and phone calls. And so I think, part of why I love what you have been committed so much of your career to, Marlon, is what I see lacking in education, which is then manifested in the marketplace. Even for those, like, I went to a Christian college and I had a great experience. I had zero integration of faith and work. I did not have an integrated biblical worldview taught to me, even at a great evangelical institution.
Interesting. Yeah.
It was still dualism.
Yeah.
When we compartmentalize history, education, truth, thought, and living, you end up with inconsistent outcomes and inconsistent living. And I think the great joy for me is when we realize that economics is actually an expression of theology, and accounting and HR, all those things stem from a worldview.
Theology is the queen of the sciences.
It is the queen of the science. Whether you name it or not, you're like, it may be junk, but you're operating off of one. And I think at the earliest stages, like, I love seeing my kids wrestle with, like, how does this history and this philosophy manifest in what's happening in this part of world events and geopolitics, and how does this, like, all those things are more connected than we ever realize. And thus business is the same opportunities to manifest that in a different theater.
Yeah, that is wonderful. And I don't want to give the impression of what I said earlier that fair price, fair pay is obviously what we're after. We're not always offering more.
Sure.
Just as I'm sure anybody is, but there are instances where more than somebody else does, and they're not asking what they should. And yep. I think there's a responsibility in a biblical response to operate that way sometimes. What is I know for maybe for those listening a little bit more about C12, talk about the monthly pattern for members and benefits for members and that sort of thing. I don't mind this being a bit of a shameless plug, and it is even a funny way to say it, because I think there are people listening to this that may not know about C12 but that would like to go find out more.
Sure. So you heard Marla and I say a bunch of things around these big ideas, but practically, like, what is C12? So it stands for the Christian 12 group. And the idea literally is we facilitate hundreds of forums, which are monthly meetings that are 7 hours in length with a professional facilitator we call a chair. And those people join and they're part of that forum every month. Like I'm in a member of a forum that meets on the third Thursday of every month. And so that's just on my calendar, 9 to 4. We're going through business education, ministry education, accountability. It is like an external board of directors, but without the power to hire you, fire you, or block you, but committed to your success, working through issues, holding each other accountable. And there's curriculum, there's tools, there's technology to help reinforce that and drive this excellence commitment we're chasing after. And then there's the chair does one-on-one coaching each month to help, again, get some personal application driven there. And then you're also part of this global community. And so, like you said, it's powerful in your forum. I'm in a forum that's got a healthcare company, an AI medical software company, cybersecurity, manufacturing. The diversity of perspectives in my forum makes me a better leader.
It's remarkable. Yeah.
But I can also go talk to other people who are in my context around the country, or leverage the fact there's thousands of other people doing this. And so we're in about 150 cities, 130 of those being in the US, 20 something being outside the US right now. And it's, again, for-profit and nonprofit businesses. We do focus on, it's got to be businesses that have got employees and revenue, and at a spot where you're truly running a business. It doesn't fit for kind of early stage startups, but it's a really neat force that is impacting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people every month through those we employ.
Having a really wonderful impact. Where do you see C12 going?
Yeah, we in our space, we're the largest player in our space, but the reality is it's a massively unserved space. So being the biggest of the least in a blue ocean just means we got a good beginning, but we got a lot of places to go. So right now we got a near-term goal of by 2025 getting to serve 5,000 members who will be impacting 10 million people every month through their businesses and be in about 175 cities. We're doing a big emphasis on international things right now. So we're launching in Taiwan, South Africa, looking at the Philippines this winter. We're already in Malaysia, Singapore, and Brazil. So we're getting to see some a cool global perspective, which has a whole bunch of learning. And we're getting to the place there where actually can do some reverse flow, where we're learning things from those countries we can help apply in this country.
It's great. Yeah.
And my hope is like why get bigger? Bigger is not always better. And our founder, Buck Jacobs, always exhorted me, Mike, I'd rather be holy than huge.
Yeah.
And the quality matters more than the quantity. And yet what we find is there's so many men and women running businesses who don't know this, who don't have this, that it can have such a transformational effect on that we want to get there. Right now we serve less than 4,000 people, right about 4,000 people. There's about 75,000 men and women running businesses in America that qualify for our program that are near cities that could be served, and less than 10,000 of them are involved in anything. And so
there's a lot of opportunity. Yeah.
And it's a generational change play. Like if we can help, one of my passions is integrated discipleship. How do you bring all of life together and see as part
Sorry
of
about my dog. That's, by the way, you can't see him. That's my border collie. He's the official breed of classical education.
That's the mascot of classical. Well, in my house, it's a Siamese cat. So yours is cooler.
That's great. Your children, you're getting into experiencing through your kids what a classical education looks like. Maybe for the last minute or two, tell us how you might see classically educated people being well equipped and maybe more effectively equipped for C12, running businesses, seeing business ministry, and that sort of thing. Is there any correlation that you're able to put to that yet?
Yes, and I think the differential is widening, frankly. American education is not doing so hot. And so even just I took, when my daughters turned 7, I started taking them on business trips with me at least once a year. And I was taking my 8-year-old on a trip last year, and on the airplane, that we're getting on board, the stewardess says, "Hey, young lady, are you traveling with your dad?" And she just shakes her hand, and my daughter answers her question and has a 20-second conversation. And we're getting off the plane. The stewardess says, "Young lady, you're going to be a leader and change the world one day." And she said, "Why?" And she's like, "Because you're so impressive." And she said, "Because I said hello and had a conversation? Like, what's it based upon?" And so, you don't realize it's actually, the bar is so low that the fact that you
It's a
can
relative perspective.
So I think the fact that I'm watching kids involved in this kind of education, they read material instead of be on screens. They're forced to think critically. They are forced to engage and have a higher ownership in learning, not just passing. I think we've had a dangerous shift in most education systems of mistaking like passing with learning. And I think the emphasis on learning is creating so much more well-formed thinkers and humans, that whether my daughters will run companies, I don't know what they'll want to do. They joke about it. They'll probably naturally be bubbled into leadership roles because they think and they communicate and they connect dots and they ask questions and they try to understand things that will be a strategic advantage in almost any industry context.
That is wonderful. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Marlon. Thanks for the work you do.
Really good to have you here. Folks, you have joined us today for Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. See you next time.